dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to step into the life of a man whose words burned brighter than the spotlight itself, Tupac Shakur. He was more than a rapper. He was a poet, a fighter, a dreamer who carried the weight of his people's pain and turned it into art. So find a quiet moment. Let the noise of the world fade away and travel with me through the story of Tupac, his rise, his struggles, and the legacy he left behind. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to follow, share, and stay with me for more journeys like this one. Now close your eyes and let the story begin. The first sound he ever knew was not a lullaby. It was the city, restless, loud, alive. In the early 1970s, Harlem never truly slept. It hummed like a drum under the skin of New York, pulsing with rhythm and struggle. Somewhere in a small apartment, a young woman held her newborn close and whispered words stronger than any prayer. His name was Tupac Amaru Shakur, named after an Incan revolutionary who fought until his final breath. His mother, Afeni, chose the name on purpose. She wanted her son to remember where he came from. Courage, resistance, hope. Afeni herself was a warrior, a member of the Black Panther Party, a movement that dared to stand tall against injustice. She had been arrested while pregnant with him, charged in a sweeping case that could have cost her freedom. But she defended herself in court and walked out acquitted, free to bring her son into the world on her own terms. Tupac was born out of the defiance, out of that flame. Their life was far from easy. Money was scarce, homes changed often, and food sometimes ran out before the end of the week. But what never ran out was love and art. Afeni filled their world with words. She read poetry aloud, like gospel. Langston Hughes, Nikki Giovanni, Maya Angelou. Their verses became lullabies. When the city outside grew rough, Afeni told her son, "You are not the street. You are the voice that can speak over them." And he listened. Tupac was quick, not just clever, but deeply curious. He noticed everything: the rhythm of footsteps, the sadness behind laughter, the beauty hiding in broken places. While other kids drew superheroes, he wrote poems about the people he saw every day: the tired man on the corner, the mother holding 2 jobs, the little girl who smiled even when she had nothing. When Afeni moved the family to Baltimore, Tupac found something he didn't expect: a stage. At the Baltimore School for the Art, he discovered performance, theater, poetry, music. There he could transform pain into art. His classmates remembered him as magnetic, not because he tried to be, but because he simply was. He studied Shakespeare, jazz, ballet, rap, anything that could hold emotion. He learned how to shape truth into rhythm, and rhythm into truth. Teachers saw in him what few saw in teenagers: both fire and wisdom. He became close friends with another student, a girl named Jada Pinkett, who would later remember him as the most alive person I ever met. Even then, his words carried prophecy. He once wrote in a school notebook. Those words became a kind of spell, one the future would never forget. But Baltimore, full of its art, could not shield him from reality. Outside the classroom walls, poverty still bit hard. Violence crept closer. He saw the two sides of America every day, one of opportunity, one of despair. When his family moved again, this time to Marin City, California, Tupac carried both worlds inside him, the artist and the survivor. California in the late 1980s was bright but volatile. Palm Street and gunfire, beaches and poverty standing side by side. There he met young dreamers like himself, people who spoke in rhythm, who told their stories over beats instead of pages. That's where he found hip-hop, or maybe where hip-hop found him. He joined a collective called Digital Underground, first as a dancer, a background performer, but even in the background, people noticed him. He moved with rhythm, spoke with conviction. When he finally grabbed the microphone, everything stopped. The words that came out were sharp and alive, carved from truth. He did not rap about fantasy. He rapped about survival. His voice was young, but it carried history. Soon, he stepped into the spotlight. In 1991, his debut album, Tupacalypse, now hit the street, a title that sounded like both warning and revolution. It wasn't polished or pretty. It was raw. It was angry. It was real. Songs like Trapped and Brenda's got a baby told stories that mainstream music ignored. Poverty, injustice, forgotten youth. For some, his music was uncomfortable. For others, it was liberation. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for everyone who had been told they were invisible. The critics called him dangerous. The youth called him truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced. Tupac Shakur, the boy raised on poverty, the son of a panther, the dreamer from Baltimore, had found his voice. Once he began to speak, the world began to listen. By the early 1990s, the rhythm that once echoed in small corners had become a roar. Tupac Shakur was no longer just a name whispered among hip-hop fans. He was a voice the world could not ignore. Everywhere he went, the air seemed to change. He spoke with urgency, moved with energy, and lived like every day might be his last. His words carried both the calm of poetry and the thunder of protest. The boy who had once written quiet verses in the Baltimore notebook now stood before thousands, microphone in hand, head high, eyes burning with purpose. His second album, Strictly for My Niggas, came in 1993, and it hit harder, louder, deeper. It was both message and movement. Songs like Keep Your Head Up became anthems of hope, calling out to women, to mothers, to the forgotten and the tired. He sang, "You are appreciated and the world believed him. There was gentleness beneath the anger, compassion beneath the fire. That balance, the poet and the warrior, was what made him magnetic. But fame, as it often does, brought storms with it. The more Tupac spoke, the more the world wanted from him. Every headline, every performance, every interview became magnified. He was no longer just an artist. He was a symbol for power, for protest, for rebellion. And symbols, once created, are hard to live, as his life was moving too fast. The street that raised him still called his name, and sometimes he answered. Between studio sessions and movie sets, the chaos of fame and the danger of loyalty began to blur. Still, the art did not stop. He began acting, a natural evolution for someone who had studied theatre and emotion since childhood. His first major role, in June's 1992, shocked audiences. He didn't just play a character, he became one, complex, broken, alive. Critics called him electric. Hollywood called him next. More films followed. Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson, Above the Rim. Gridlock's Earth. Each role showed a different side of him. Vulnerable, fierce, searching. Through it all, he carried the same truth. Even pain can be art. But the street never forgot him, and he never forgot them. Tupac lived in two worlds, the poetic and the real, and they collided often. Police harassment, court cases, betrayals, rumors, feuds, and the spotlight amplified everything. He was rising, yes, but also burning. In interviews, he spoke with a mix of clarity and exhaustion. I'm not a role model, he would say. I'm real. He didn't want perfection. He wanted honesty. That honesty frightened some people. He spoke about poverty like a preacher, about racism like a soldier, about death like someone who had already seen it too many times. Yet, even when anger fled, he never lost his heart. At his core, Tupac was still the boy Afeni had raised, the dreamer who believed words could heal. Between the storms, he returned to poetry, scribbling verses late into the night. One of his most famous poems, The Rose That Grew from Concrete, came from this quiet reflection. It was short, but it said everything. He was that rose, fragile and strong, beautiful and wounded, growing despite every obstacle. As his fame reached new heights, Tupac's circle grew larger. Artists, activists, dreamers, hustlers, everyone wanted a piece of the fire. He recorded constantly, writing songs that felt like diary entries. He spoke of loyalty, betrayal, violence and love, not as ideas, but as experiences. The duality inside him, peace and rage, love and defiance, became the pulse of his art. He could sing Dear Mama one moment, tender and reverent, and their raw holler, If You Hear Me, the next, fierce and unyielding. The media often painted him as contradiction, the gentle poet who carried fury, the revolutionary who partied like a star. But maybe that was the truth of him, that he contained multitudes and refused to be reduced to one version of himself. By 1995, he had become a figure both admired and feared, beloved by millions, criticized by many. He was arrested, shot and betrayed, all within months, yet he survived it all, walking out of hospitals and courtrooms like someone who had wrestled fate itself and kept breathing. His eyes carried stories that few could understand. He was living at a speed no heart could sustain, and yet he never slowed. When he spoke in interviews, his words were fire and prophecy. I might not I might not live to see the change, he said once, but I'll die trying to be part of it. The boy from Harlem had become a mirror for an entire generation, reflecting their pain, their pride, their contradictions. And as his fame grew higher, so did the weight on his shoulders. The world didn't just listen to Tupac Shakur, it demanded that he live the very revolution he wrote about. And though the fire inside him burned bright, it was beginning to consume him too. The fire that once lifted him now burned all around him. By the mid-1990s, Tupac Shakur was both legend and lightning, too bright to ignore, too human to be safe. Everywhere he went, cameras followed, and every headline carried his name. Some called him a prophet, some called him a threat, but behind the noise there was still just a man, one who woke up every morning trying to make sense of the world he spoke for. The storms in his life were no longer just metaphors, they were real. Legal battles, betrayals, and near-death experiences seemed to move in circles around him. In 1994, he was shot 5 times in a recording studio in New York, an event that would change everything. He survived barely, and the world watched as he rose from his hospital bed with a new fire in his eyes, harder, sharper, more determined than ever. He began to feel hunted, not just by enemies, but by fate itself. The line between friend and foe grew thin. Trust became fragile. Yet even as pain surrounded him, creativity poured out of him like water from a broken dam. While serving time in prison after a controversial conviction, Tupac kept writing. On paper, behind bars, he returned to what had always saved him, his words, poems, letters, verses. He filled notebook after notebook. He wrote of freedom, faith, and the search for peace. He read philosophy, studied politics, reflected on the weight of fame and the fragility of life. And when he was released, it was as if he had stepped back into the world carrying the wind itself. In 1996, he signed with Death Row Records, joining forces with Suge Knight and Dr. Dre, creating some of the most iconic music in hip-hop history. The sound was raw and cinematic, powerful enough to shake speakers and souls alike. Then came All Eyes on Me, a double album, massive, defiant, unstoppable. 27 tracks of rhythm and rage, with swagger and reflection. It was both celebration and farewell, though no one knew it yet. Songs like California Love, Ambitions as a Reader, and I Ain't Mad at Her filled radios and street. Each one carried that same pulse, the heartbeat of a man trying to live fast enough to outrun time. Fame reached its peak, so did the pressure. The rivalry between East Coast and West Coast rap, once just competition, had grown into something darker. Tupac found himself at the center of it, a storm of loyalty and violence, pride and misunderstanding. He wore armor in his words now, but beneath it, the poet still lived. He still sent messages to his fans, reminders to stay proud, to keep dreaming, to never stop questioning. He still talked about love, about mothers, about growing up without guidance. He still dreamed of peace, but he was tired. Even in his laughter, there was a quiet shadow. In interviews from those final months, you can hear it, the softness behind the fire. I feel like I've lived so many lives already, he said once, smiling faintly. I don't think I'm going to be here long, but I'm at peace with that. There was no fear in his voice, only certainty. He had seen too much, given too much, felt too deeply. He knew that legacies are not measured in years, but in impact, in the way one voice can echo long after it goes silent. Then came Las Vegas, September 1996, a night of music, noise, celebration, a car ride, then gunfire. Again, sudden, merciless, final. 6 years later, Tupac Amaru Shakur was gone. He was 25 years old. The world stopped. Fans gathered in the street, lighting candles, holding radios, weeping to the songs that had once given them strength. It felt impossible that someone so alive, so full of rhythm, could fall silent. But silence for Tupac was never really silence. In the weeks after his death, new verses began to surface, poems, recordings, unfinished songs. He had been writing constantly, as if he knew the world would need his words more than his prisons. Posthumous albums followed. The Don Kilominati, The 7-Day Theory, Are You Still Down, Until the End of Time, each one like a message sent from beyond the noise, each one carrying that same voice, that same pulse, reminding the world that truth never dies. Even now, his music still speaks of struggle, of love, of resilience. Young artists still quote him, students still study him, and millions still find comfort in his voice when the world feels too heavy. Because in the end, Tupac's greatest gift was not fame or controversy, it was empathy, the ability to feel everything deeply and to make others feel it too. He taught that pain could be poetry, that truth could be rhythm, that even in a cracked sidewalk, a rose could grow. And though the man is gone, the rhythm remains steady, alive, eternal, because legends do not rest in silence, they rest in sound. Years have passed, yet his voice still lingers, not in the noise of fame, but in the quiet spaces between. When you listen closely, you can still hear me. On late night radios, through open car windows, in the headphones of a boy walking home from school. A verse, a word, sigh, and there he is again. Tupac Shakur speaking as if he never left. The man may have died, but the message stayed breathing. After his death, the world tried to make sense of him. They built murals and memorials, documentaries and books. Scholars debated his politics. Artists borrowed his fire. Fans turned his lyrics into tattoos, prayers inked into skin. But somewhere beyond all the noise and nostalgia, something simpler endured, the feeling. Because Tupac wasn't just a rapper, or an actor, or a poet. He was a pulse, a rhythm that spoke of what it meant to be human. Fragile, fearless, full of contradictions. He was the anger of injustice, but also the tenderness of love. He was the swagger and the prayer, the fight and the forgiveness. He was the street corner philosopher, the dreamer, the survivor. And in many ways, he still is. Every generation seems to find him again. Young people who weren't even born when he died discover his songs and feel something they can't quite name: familiarity. Because his truth was timeless. His questions were universal. Why do we live like this? How do we rise? Can love survive pain? He didn't offer perfect answers, only the courage to keep asking. Afeni Shakur, his mother, carried that same courage long after he was gone. She became the guardian of his legacy, ensuring that his music and message reached beyond his time. When she spoke about him, her voice carried both pride and ache. "My son," she said once, "was a light. Some lights are too bright to last long, but they keep shining even when you close your eyes." And she was right. His posthumous works continued to surface, notebooks filled with thought, dreams, unfinished lyrics. One poem reads simply. His songs became lessons, changes, Gito gospel, until the end of time, hymns for those still fighting, still dreaming. When the beat starts and his voice returns, it feels less like a recording and more like a heartbeat waking again. People often wonder what he would have become had he lived, an elder statesman of hip-hop, political leader, perhaps even a poet laureate. But maybe he had already become everything he needed to be. Because some lives are meant not to last, but to ignite. He left behind a blueprint of honesty, of courage, of art that feels like confession. He showed that you can speak your pain and still love the world that caused it, that even when everything falls apart, creation remains possible. Some night, when the streets grow quiet and the city lights flicker like stars, it's easy to imagine him still somewhere, notebook in hand, writing about the world as it is and the world as it could be. In the end, Tupac's story was not a tragedy. It was a transformation. He lived fast, burned bright, and turned his own struggles into songs that healed others. He took the pain of generations and reshaped it into the rhythm. And though his body is gone, his words remain alive, not frozen in time, but moving through it. Every beat that speaks of truth, every lyric that dares to feel, carries a trace of him. In classrooms, in protest, in the quiet hum of headphones at midnight, his spirit still moves. He once wrote, and that is how he remains, not as an idol, but as a mirror, reflecting the strength in our pain, the hope in our fear, the poetry hidden in our scars. Tupac Shakur, the rose that grew from concrete, still stands. The petals may have faded, but the scent of his truth endures. The echo never fades, it only changes form, from voice to rhythm, from rhythm to memory, from memory to dream. And tonight, if you listen closely, you might just hear it, the faint hum of a heartbeat in the dark, steady and eternal. And that was the story of Tupac Shakur, a soul who lived fast, loved deeply, and left behind echoes but still move us today. If his journey spoke to you, let it remind you that even in pain, beauty can be born. and that true voices never fade. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for keeping his story alive. There are many more voices waiting to be heard, so stay close and let the next story find you.